Solid.js has really made signals come back into the mainstream. We've seen signals get introduced into just about every popular framework now.
We're very open about the fact that we would like to replace the existing systems eventually. No API survives first contact with developers, really.
What's up, friends? Welcome to the Web Dev Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Langsdorf, and today we are going to be digging into a new release from the Angular team. We are going to be learning about Angular signal forms. Now, this is something that I've heard a lot of people asking about. And so to help us dive into this, get our heads around it and learn what it does, I've brought in one of the Angular core team members, a good friend, brilliant engineer, Alex Rickabaugh. Alex, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
You and I have had a few short opportunities to hang out, and it's always been a pleasure. I don't think I've ever actually asked you for your bio. So for me and for folks who maybe aren't familiar with you and your work, do you want to give us the high level of who you are, what you do?
So I'm a software engineer at Google. And for about 10 years now, since 2015, I've been working on Angular. I kind of started there as really, I would call myself a junior developer back then, and worked on a bunch of different projects, ended up working a lot in the compiler before kind of transitioning to become the technical lead now for the Angular core framework. So compiler, runtime, forms, router, etc.
You've been doing this for how long now?
Working on Angular, about 10 years. At Google, 15 now.
Nice.
Which seems like crazy amount of time.
I know the time flies. Somebody asked me yesterday, like, how long have you been an engineer? And I was like, oh God, it's been over 20 years now. Oh no.
Yeah, when you start thinking of it as not just a job, but a career, like looking back at a career, it's like, wow.
You are now you said the technical lead on Angular?
On the Angular core framework. So Angular is divided,
framework.
Into, we have framework, we have components,
Okay.
We have tooling, which is like CLI, we have developer infrastructure and so forth. So I lead the framework team, and then we have Jeremy Elborn, who's over kind of we call him the Uber tech lead. He's the tech lead for Angular as a whole.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I am very excited to learn about this because you just had a big release. You just launched V21. And I saw, as some of the lead up to this, I saw questions from folks like Mark Texan, who's here in the chat right now. I saw the official Angular account asking, and some of the questions that were being asked were like, what do you want to see? Like, what features do you want going out to the dev community? And one of the loudest answers that I saw and most common answers was Angular signal forms. So I've talked to a couple folks on the team, Jessica Janik, I've talked to Mark, and we've covered signals. We've gone over Angular in different places. If you want to see that, you can go back to previous episodes of Learn with Jason on CodeTV and find a whole bunch of content about Angular. But we've never really dug into forms. And I don't actually know what is meant by a signal form. So maybe just get us out of the gate. What's the elevator pitch for a signal form in Angular?
The way I've started to think about form system in general is it's kind of an interaction pattern that you're offering the user. Users have a lot of expectations on when they see inputs on a screen, how those are going to behave as they start typing in them, when they're going to get errors, what it's going to do if one of the inputs is disabled. And so in that sense, the form system in Angular is really a way of creating the state to drive a form UI. And state, of course, is the domain of signals, right? That's why we added signals to Angular, is to better track and update the UI in response to state changes. So you can think of the signal form system as a wrapper around your data, the data you actually want the user to edit, that creates all of the form state and keeps it updated as things validate and so forth. We actually kind of knew when we were making the decision to do signals in Angular, we were looking at kind of replacing Zone.js with something, and signals was one option on the table. There were a few others. But forms was actually one of the main drivers of that decision. So we even knew back then that we wanted to do a signal form system if we created a signal reactivity system in the framework.
Maybe just a quick recap. A signal is a concept that we've been seeing pop up. I think it was, Knockout was the first one to really, was that right? That kind of
Knockout was the first to popularize it in JS, yeah.
And then we saw, different types of signals, things like NGRX was one of the things that we saw that had signals in it, right? And then we Solid.js has really made signals come back into the mainstream thought. We've seen signals get introduced into just about every popular framework now. And I might be getting a couple things a little bit out of order there in my in my thinking. But
you're thinking of RxJS, which is the like observable library, which is kind of a different way of managing state. But even that has this thing called behavior subject, which is actually kind of a signal in disguise.
And so the idea of a signal, I'm going to let you take this because I feel like I'm going to put my foot in my mouth if I try to high level this.
So a signal is kind of a way to box up a value. So if you think about a variable in the language, right, it's a container, you can put a value inside of it, whether it's a Boolean or some complex object, and you can read it from a function and get the current value of that variable. A signal is kind of behaves the same way. It's a box that you can put a value in, you can open that box and look inside and read it. What makes a signal special is the place where you read it, the kind of function you're reading it from, or the template, if you're inside of the UI, is able to understand that you've read that signal from that context. And so you, in addition to getting the value, you get this extra piece of information that you now depend on that value. And that's very useful for a UI, because if you have a text binding somewhere where you say, I want the value of this text binding to match what's in this signal, then the framework can understand, oh, there's a dependency between these things. And when the signal updates, I need to go and resolve the UI and get it back in sync with what that value is.
Practically, what that ends up meaning is if I have a value that's stored, like, say, a number, and elsewhere on the page in the UI, I have things that are derived from that number. Like I say, I want 1 ticket, and then there's a price, and I can say, 1 ticket, 2 ticket, 3 ticket. If I update the number of tickets that I want, I can then derive a new subtotal based on how many tickets and times the current price. And I don't have to do something like, because historically what you would end up doing is you would have like a value up here, and then every component would need that value passed in as a prop. And then every time you change a value, you have to re-render the entire component, every component in the tree, even if it doesn't actually use that value and it's just passing it through, which, there's a lot of arguments for that's super clear. It's really easy to track where things go, but it also has a lot of waste where you're re-rendering a lot of things. And that can cause a ton of complexity when you've got a lot of components that depend on different things, and you don't necessarily want to blow away all the state of this component just because it passes a value through. So signals allow you to basically, you get to shortcut. The signals only cause things to update where they are actually used without necessarily requiring a full re-render. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Memoization is a kind of a key part of how signals work. So what you're describing of having a quantity and a price, and then like being able to compute the cost from that, we call computed signals, where you say that there's a concept called cost, which is created by just writing a function, right? Like quantity times price. But because signals track dependencies, we now know that, when either quantity or price updates, the cost has to throw away the stale value and recompute. And anything that doesn't depend on quantity or price doesn't have to recompute, doesn't have to re-render.
Right.
So you can think about signals as kind of optimizing the diffing when things change based on specific data, rather than kind of running the render functions and then diffing the virtual DOM of the output.
Yeah, and I think that what really starts to make this shine as a concept is when you start thinking about the fact that, like, even in this ticket scenario, you've got multiple different tickets, you've got multiple different quantities, you've got whether or not they're still in stock, you've got things like maybe timers on how long we'll hold the tickets for you. Each of those things is an independent piece of state that needs to affect the things around it. And if you don't have something like signals, you are either manually managing all of this stuff, which is definitely doable. I mean, we've done it in the past and we could do it today, but it ends up being an extremely finicky process. You have to know where all these things are connected. You have to manually update it every time it changes, or you end up in kind of the classic prop style where you have to re-render the entire page anytime any piece of data is changed to make sure you're deriving correct UI from this top level state. So signals are a great way, and we've seen them in action elsewhere on the show to show that you can short circuit that part. You don't have to re-render everything, and it helps us avoid a lot of like use effect in React, which React has also done some work to improve this. But I think use effect is the classic example of like how much this hurts when you're re-rendering everything every time a value changes. Right? So in forms specifically, though, I feel like it's interesting to me that like there were signals, right? And then as a completely separate feature, signal forms. What is it about forms that made them not just like any other part of the UI where you could just say, okay, well, we have signals in Angular, let's just use them now?
I guess there are two things. One is, Angular has an existing form system, and depending on your perspective, it has two existing form systems. And they really represent kind of two different ways of structuring the state and values of a form. We have both template driven, where you're kind of pushing a lot of the logic, putting the business logic actually inside the template, and that has pros and cons. And then there were these things called reactive forms, which was kind of using more RxJS model-driven forms. Reactive in the sense of observables, not necessarily signals. Neither of these things plug and play very well with signals because they were designed, obviously, before Angular had signals as an option. So either way, we knew we needed to kind of upgrade the form system and allow you to bring signals into the mix. And there have been, these systems are like 8 years old at this point. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in HTML. Plus, there's a huge debate in the Angular community of like, should you use reactive forms or template-driven forms? And so we wanted to kind of resolve that once and for all by bringing the best of both worlds into a new form system that everyone can use that depends on signals.
One question that isn't intended to be a gotcha, but is like the hard question to ask. If you've got these previous two ways of approaching forms and you've introduced a third, does that mean that you're phasing out the other ways, or is it further broadening how somebody could approach forms in Angular?
Oh, we're very open about the fact that we would like to replace the existing systems eventually.
Okay, so it's not an active deprecation, but you're going to move all suggestions that way.
Yes, yeah. This is intended to eventually become the one true form solution.
Can I ask a maintainer question?
Yeah.
So you're trying to, you see something that you see as being a clearly better solution than what has been done in the past. But Angular is used by tens of thousands, if not more, developers across the world, all of whom are varying levels of, legacy systems or brand new systems. Some of them are willing to upgrade the whole thing today because V21 just came out, and some of them are still on, V2 because that's what they shipped back when it first came out, right? How do you approach behavioral change when you've got such a massive and varied user base?
It's a challenge. And I think actually that's one of Angular's differentiating factors as a framework out there. We spend a lot of time thinking about kind of how we can introduce these new things, like bring you signals, bring you signal forms, bring you new animations package, for example, and still maintain that backwards compatibility and not leave kind of existing code bases that are on, V15, V14, et cetera, like stranded. So signal forms is new, but it also has a lot of thought put into it on how that upgrade path would work if someone did want to kind of migrate from one system to the other. So there's a whole interop layer for it where you can kind of take your existing form and start migrating it to signal forms one piece at a time. So we think about compatibility in that way. Then we have our migration tooling in the CLI, where as much as possible, we give you kind of just run a command to update from one thing to another. For example, Angular used to have this concept called ng modules that was central to how you structured component templates. It was built for reasons at a time when the world kind of looked like it was going in a certain direction. We introduced standalone components, which is kind of a much more streamlined version of how you write template dependencies. Right. There's an upgrade command you run that can take your entire application and convert it from ng modules to standalone. And it will get most of it right. And where it can't figure things out, it will leave comments for you like, hey, you'll have to fix this piece. We still also have not deprecated ng modules because we know there are applications out there that are still kind of built this way and still using it and haven't had the chance to upgrade over. So that's kind of the third piece is we do put a lot of effort into maintaining the kind of older ways of doing things as long as there are customers that are still getting value from it.
And is that something that you see a world where, maybe in V25, you start putting in notices that are like, hey, you're doing it the old way and you should maybe consider this new way? Or do you just kind of say like, you know what, if somebody wants to do it, we'll let them do it for as long as they want?
More the latter. We tend to be more customer driven when it comes to what to deprecate, where we're really looking at our community to tell us, like, when are you done with this thing, right? When do you want to move on and start discouraging people from actually using this path?
How do you determine that? Like, do you get anonymous reporting that says when people use features or anything like that?
Yeah, we have some of those channels where we can look at HTTP archive and look at Angular applications that are deployed and see what features they're using. We have our developer survey that we run every year where we're actually just asking our community, hey, what's important to you? And we can ask those kinds of questions there.
So for somebody who is looking to use these today, it sounds like, I know that there's probably documentation on how to get started. It's still experimental.
Yes.
And so what are the caveats around it being experimental? Are there any things that people should keep in mind as they start adopting this?
Yeah, so we have two categorizations of APIs that are of the like beta category, experimental and developer preview. Experimental thing, and they kind of have the same caveat with regards to these are APIs that could change from release to release, right? Normally, Angular says if we release an API as stable, we give you if we are going to make a breaking change to it, we give you 2 major versions to migrate before we, for example, from the time we deprecate something to the time we remove it. Or we have some kind of auto migration for you that will make sure that as you update the code, it kind of follows along. That is not true for experimental and developer preview APIs. We're explicitly kind of carving out, hey, we're still working on this. We can change it. Kind of go to production at your own risk. If you want to use this API in production, it might work for you, but be aware that you might pay some extra cost if we do decide to make behavioral changes.
Yeah, when you upgrade to the next version, you might have to make some tweaks to the code to keep up with whatever you've been. And I guess that's like a great way to signal too that this is new, and you don't necessarily want to commit to an API if once it gets out into the world, you realize, no, we missed this one thing. And if you're stuck supporting it forever, then it's really, really hard to like correct those sorts of things. And we've seen this, I think there's stuff on the web platform that's just, you don't break backward compatibility on the web, right? So you just kind of live with it the way that it is. But it's nice when you're a framework author because you can be explicit and say, hey, we're learning. So here's our signal to you that we're still learning on this one. And we want your feedback, but also your feedback means you may have to tweak your own code to like keep up with our evolution as we learn more about how this works.
Absolutely, right? Like no API survives first contact with developers, really. And so we used to be very conservative about releasing new features. When we rolled it out, right, the moment it became public API, we had this commitment to 2 major versions, which is roughly 1 year for us of stability. We were missing out on the chance to get that kind of early feedback and involve developers in the actual design process. And so that's really what experimental is for us is, hey, this is not fully baked yet, but we're letting you onto it early because we really value that kind of on the ground feedback about how it's working for real use cases. Then we have developer preview, which is more of like a extended release candidate. Like we think this is feature complete. This could ship as stable, but we want to give developers one more chance to kind of bang on it and see what breaks.
Got it. I mean, this is wonderful. I am really excited to see how the Angular team has just been, it just seems like y'all have been pushing hard to really modernize, to add a lot of quality of life improvements. A lot of cool things are coming out of Angular right now. And so for anybody who wants to check it out, you should head over to angular.dev. You can find Alex on Twitter at SynAlex. It's SYNALX is where you're going to find him online. Alex, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. For anybody who wants to see more of this, we're going to be pair programming on Learn with Jason. You can head over to codetv.dev and look for Learn with Jason to find the episode. This has been the Web Dev Podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher. If you want to subscribe, share it with your friends, that means a lot to us here on the show. Thank you so much, Alex, for hanging out.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We will see you all next time.